Hello, this is my letters to our interventions kind of connection video that I'm going to do for interventions that have to deal more with the comprehension side of things. So in my mind, that's LLI, that's Read Naturally Live, depending on what level they are on. And this is the comprehension piece that I'm going through right now in letters currently. And so the two big things I'm going to talk about is vocabulary and then planning for a comprehension lesson. So here on the right side, you see a pyramid. And one of the things that we talked about that the teachers are hearing in letters is about the importance of vocabulary and how vital it is for comprehension. Probably one of, if not the most important part of comprehension is that vocabulary piece. We have kind of the word recognition and the language comprehension pieces that form reading comprehension on the end. And in the language comprehension piece, the vocabulary is such a huge foundational piece. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to hit on tier 2 words. And now in Read Naturally Live, it provides you with vocabulary lists. So you have words that are provided that are tier 2 or pretty close to. But in LLI, I know you have some, but you might have to find some of those on your own. And so what that looks like is being really, really intentional about picking the words out of a passage and that might be anywhere from 5 to 10 words that are tier 2. So tier 2 words are words that the student may not know that they should know that word pops up in their everyday lives or it pops up in other texts frequently. Those are your tier 2, and it's a little bit subjective. Tier 3 words are words that they probably don't know, but they're not words that you need to know. It doesn't show up in the text a lot. It's not something that they see in their day-to-day lives a ton. They're vocabulary words that are probably not known definitions for the kids, but they're not words that they readily need right now in their reading. And so you gotta kind of pick what are those words and being intentional if you have the opportunity. I know in Read Naturally Live, we haven't, you don't always see the passage until they've opened it. But once they've opened it and you got to revisit that maybe at a second day and you've seen it, maybe you can find some words or you can write down some words that you've seen in that passage and you can bring those up before they read that passage a second time. Okay, in LLI, you have the books. So if you know you're reading chapter 2 and 3, maybe you're skimming through chapter 2 and 3 and picking out some of those words that you might want to run over with your students before you start reading that chapter or that passage, whatever it may be. And I know, again, time is limited. So even if they provide you with those words, great, use those words. If you've got time to look for other words that might be problem words, do that as well. But even if you're just using the words they give you, we'll talk about how we can maximize that later. On the left side of my screen here, you have a planning for comprehension, kind of a guideline, right? And I think the big things to hit on are these are the things before you read the story that you should be discussing and planning for your student. And again, in Read Naturally Live, you don't always know that story ahead of time. Maybe the more you get familiar, you'll have an understanding of it. Or as you've seen them read it once, you can kind of pick up on some of those things and then talk about these the second time. But the big thing, like we talked about with the word mix one, is that background knowledge. Any background knowledge you can give to them about the topic, the better. Telling them, is it fiction? Is it in a narrative text? Is it informational? Telling them what the text structure is, why you're reading it today, and some of the vocabulary we talked about right here. There's the vocabulary piece. That's the pyramid over here, and then looking for challenging phrases or idioms or word, figurative language that you might find. You can include that in before you read the story. Then when reading the story, it's the same. The questions that we're asking, we're doing good work with that already. Now on this side, if I can go backwards a little bit, here is a sample story from Read Naturally Live that I pulled out. Now on the right side, you have some of the vocabulary words that they have chosen for this story. So what we can do is provide as much information about those words as possible, try to make those connections for kids. So as they're reviewing and they're reading those definitions, you can be hitting on, oh, borrow, that's a 2-syllable word. I see it has a suffix, ed at the end, which means it happened in the past tense. So I need like kind of that technical information about the word and then trying to make those connections. Like, oh, maybe I borrowed you a pencil, right? What's something that you borrowed to somebody, or making them think about, okay, how have I used that words in the context of my life? An exam. An exam is a test or to see what you know. So you might take an exam after this story, right? Maybe you have an exam today in math. That's a test or something that you need to know. An office and served, and going through and just doing those same things with all of those words. So even when they're reviewing and they're reading the definition, that's really kind of surface level. We want to get a little deeper, get deeper with that word and find as many connections that you can within the time frame of your intervention. I know that your time is short. Okay, now you have the story here. So let's say I've heard them read this story once, and I was reading, I saw, okay, spare, opportunity, politician, and self-taught. To me, those are some maybe tier 2 words, and maybe you think, well, that's not really a politician, might be a tier 3 word. But now, hey, before we read today, I want to talk about some of the words in this story, like spare. Okay, spare means any extra time. If you've got a spare time, that means you have time that you don't have to do something. It's open and you can do something else. So in this case, that's what spare would mean, right? Spare can also mean to save something, to save, if you were going to eat an apple or an orange and you ate the apple, you spared the orange. You saved that orange. You didn't eat it. So spare can have a couple different meanings. Okay, in this story, it means extra. Opportunity. Opportunity means a chance to do something. You have the opportunity to do it. You have a chance to go do that. Maybe you have an opportunity to go to the basketball game with a friend or to the movies. That's a chance that you have, something that you're able to do as an opportunity. And you go through those words before reading it, right? That's that pre-teaching, being intentional about our vocabulary and then going through it. Now, this story is about Abraham Lincoln, right? So if you can provide, Abraham Lincoln, he was the president during the Civil War. He helped free the slaves. He was the 15th president of the United States. Any information you can give, the people vote for president. Who's our president right now? And so just making connections to today's world, building up their background knowledge about what is a president, who Abraham Lincoln was, what is a president, who is our president today. Any of those connections, any of that background information we can provide to them before they start reading that, so that makes their comprehension a lot stronger when they get to the end. So, like I said, sometimes you have the ability to inhale a lie, know ahead of time, right? Or in Read Naturally Live, you might have to wait till after you've seen the passage once. Or I saw on the screen kind of like tiles where they can choose what story. Maybe you can kind of start seeing and get a list of those stories written down, and you can, on your own, you can come up with your own little document when you have time for prep to, okay, here's some background information about that story. Here's some background information about this story. So when the students choose that story, you can provide that background information. Now, I don't expect everyone to, okay, this is how we do things now. These are just little things. Even if you can add it a little bit, maybe just a little bit into your instruction or your intervention with the students, can be beneficial. I do not think that, okay, now this is how we have to do it. When do I have time? I don't think that at all. I just think that, okay, these are some of the practices that the teachers are hearing for comprehension. These are what the science of reading is saying is good for students. Maybe I can add, today I'm gonna work on really diving into the vocab words with the kids. Today I'm gonna try to really provide some background information about the topic that they're reading. Maybe it's one or the other, and it just is a little bit, right? Little changes built over time is to make a big impact for our kids. And so when it comes to comprehension, big thing again is if I could, from this video, if you can get 2 things from me, is being very intentional and get deeper on the vocabulary words, not just surface level, that's the definition. Really try to make connections and try to improve their background knowledge about a topic before they're reading that story, so that it kind of fills up their head with that knowledge, so that the reading comprehension piece of it becomes easier. So those are kind of the 2 things I hope that you take away from this, and maybe you can use in your interventions.